And it's about this nurse who's been sacked for offering to pray for her patients. Sister Sarah Coute lost her job at Darrant Valley Hospital in Dartford, down in Kent, after patients complained about her wanted discussions, which go against nursing guidelines. Simon Calvert is from the Christian Institute. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning.
Was she wrong to do this? Should we not be talking about faith and religion in case we offend people?
Well, thank you for the question. Of course we should be talking about faith and religion. We should be free to talk about things. There really is a culture now which is so hostile to the discussion of religion and belief, and it's not where most people are at. It's sort of coming from the top down, really. But the NHS is the biggest employer in the country. Very many of its staff will be Christians. We know from the censuses that 60% of the British population identifies Christian. Many more identify with other religions. So those who say that they have no religion are a small proportion. Those who are actual sort of fully fledged atheists a very tiny proportion. But, everyone is entitled to have freedom of belief. Everyone is entitled to talk about belief if they want to. And they're entitled not to talk about belief if they don't want to. And I think that's what's key in this case. I don't know the details of this case. It's not a Christian Institute case, but the general principle, I think everyone agrees. If somebody does not want to talk about their beliefs, they shouldn't be forced to talk about them. End of story. And I think that's what this nurse was saying her position was. She didn't force anybody, and that's key. You mustn't force people to talk about anything they don't want to talk about, especially if you're in a position of authority.
Well, this is it. This was going to be my next point. People would turn around and say, but she's in a position of authority. She has to be probably more careful than somebody just coming in off the street, if you want, wanting to discuss faith and belief.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Those in positions of authority need to be careful. The more authoritative your position, the more vulnerable the person that you are talking to, then the more you have to think twice, think three times about anything that you say to them. Whether the subject is religion or belief or anything else, you have to be very careful. But I think we have to allow staff in the NHS discretion. And if they make the judgment that this patient may be open to being asked this question, if they assess the person's vulnerability or strength, if the context is appropriate, they should be free to make that offer, as long as, if the patient says no thanks, then the conversation ends there. And that seems to be very clearly this nurse's approach. I talk to Christians in the NHS all over the country, nurses, consultants, surgeons, and lots of them tell me stories, I'm afraid to say, of a chill wind for kind of basic freedom of speech in the NHS. And for them as Christians, some of them live with a real suspicion towards them because of their beliefs, and some of them actually experience outright bigotry. Now, the NHS has to ask its Christian staff and its religious staff about their own experiences, has to ask them and try and understand where they're really coming from, and has to be careful that they are not oppressing and repressing the basic religious freedoms of their own staff, and they have to remember that the bulk of their workforce are religious. And so, yes, if somebody wants to make an offer to pray, most people, even if they're not religious, they just regard that as an offer of goodwill. And I want to give credit to most atheists. They're not such intolerant people that they can't cope if somebody says, would you like me to pray for you? They just say, no, thanks.
Yeah, it's not... teeth being bared and no! Just no, thank you very much. Having said that, I mean, if somebody is in hospital and they're feeling low, maybe they are going down for surgery. A lot of people, we've got to remember here, a lot of people do find their inner faith, if you want, when faced with some sort of adversity, or maybe in hospital, the fear of the unknown. That's when their faith comes to the fore, isn't it? So, actually, you could argue this sister is just making them feel more peaceful with themselves.
Yeah, let's imagine a scenario. If you're going through a form with a patient who's going in for surgery, and we all know the form has that question, what is your religion?
Mm-hmm.
And most people will tick C of E or whatever. If at that point the person makes the judgment that they can say, actually, if your faith is important to you, I'd be very happy to pray with you, that could be a really key moment for that person. That person could just feel the flood of relief that there is somebody willing to pray with them and for them. They may feel a real sense of comfort at the thought of turning to God in what for them may be a moment of crisis. How many stories have we all heard of people who have come to a real genuine faith and a real sense of peace with God at moments of extremity in their lives, even on their deathbeds? So that is part of the story too. And I think we have to allow for that part of the story, for those patients who would like an offer of prayer. We mustn't have in the NHS a standard, a policy, which is, well, look, what would be the reaction of the most oversensitive atheist? Right, well, let's make that the standard. That's wrong. We have to allow a degree of discretion for staff to assess the person in front of them, the relationship, the situation, the appropriateness. We have to recognise the fact that most patients coming through hospitals are going to be religious in one way or another, and most staff working in hospitals are going to be religious in one way or another. We have to get away from this idea of sort of compulsory atheism for everybody, because it's just simply not where most people are at.
Simon, nice to talk to you. Simon Calvert from the Christian Institute.